Now turn to section 1.
You are going to listen to a telephone conversation between two people, Hannah and her father. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now the test will begin. Remember, you will hear the recording only once, so answer the questions as you listen. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, 992846.
Dad, is that you?
Hannah?
Dad, I'm phoning...
The line isn't very clear.
Yes, I know. I'm on a mobile and the signal isn't very good. I'll see if I can move. Is that any better?
Yes, that's much better. Just don't move.
I'll try not to.
Have you found a place to live yet?
Yes, I think I have at last.
Wonderful.
I'm relieved because I'm fed up looking. I didn't think it was going to take me 3 weeks.
It hasn't been easy for you. I suppose it's the beginning of the academic year, and you have all the new students looking for places as well.
Yes, that's one reason. But this place is also full of new technology companies, and there are lots of young people looking for somewhere to live. And you know what that means.
Higher rents as well.
Yes, much higher.
Well, tell me, how much is it?
It isn't cheap for this area. It's £400 a month.
That's much more than you had expected.
Yes, it is. But I can't face looking anymore. I want a place where I can put my things instead of living out of a suitcase. I don't want to stay in this hotel any longer.
I guess not. So, what's the new place like?
Oh, it's really, really nice.
Oh, good.
It's in a very quiet street. It's a second-floor flat with 1 double bedroom, a large living room, kitchen and toilet and bathroom.
Sounds very nice.
Oh, it is. And guess what?
Yes?
It's got a small roof terrace looking onto the garden at the back.
Great.
And it's big enough to have my plants and a small table and chairs.
Brilliant.
Before the speakers continue their conversation, look at questions 6 to 10.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Now, what's the address?
It's 22B White Hart Road.
22E.
No, 22B. B for banana.
Right. And it's White Hart Road?
Yes?
And the postcode?
Oh, I don't think I've got it.
Okay.
No, here it is. It's EX15 9RJ.
This line is bad. Is that EX50?
No, it's EX15.
Okay. I don't think I know the road.
It's a side road, but you do know the area because it's off Garrett Lane.
Oh, right. Which end?
The other end from the stadium?
So, it won't be too noisy then?
You can still hear it from here when there's a match on.
When are we going to see you?
Well, I was going to come down on Friday evening after work, and then we could bring my things by van on Saturday afternoon. I want to move all of my stuff out, to give you and Mum more space.
We'll need to hire a van then.
It's okay, I'll pay for it.
No, don't worry. It'll be a gift from your mum and me.
Oh, Dad, it's okay,
No, I won't hear of it. We'll pay.
All right, thanks, Dad.
And if you're taking everything, we might need to hire a container lorry.
Oh, Dad!
I'm only joking.
I know.
I'll hire the van for the Saturday then. I can pick it up first thing in the morning.
Right.
And then return it in the evening.
Are you sure you don't want to stay overnight?
No, I'd best get back the same day. You know what your mum's like. She'll only worry. If I remember rightly, it's about 3 hours by road?
Yes, roughly.
Well, if we leave by lunchtime, we'll be there mid-afternoon.
Okay.
Then a couple of hours to unpack.
Then?
We could go to a nice restaurant round the corner.
Definitely. My treat.
You're on. But I'll have to be away by about 7:30-ish.
Okay.
Right then. Mum wants to have a word. I'll see you Friday.
Bye, Dad.
I'll hand you over to her. Bye.
That's the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear Joanne describing her home city of Darwin in Australia to a man called Rob, who hopes to go there. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Joanne?
Hi, you must be Rob. Nice to meet you. So, I hear you're planning to visit Australia.
Yeah, and I really wanted to talk to you because I was thinking of spending some time in Darwin, and my sister told me you're from there.
That's right.
So, tell me about it.
Well, where shall I start? Well, Darwin's in what they call the top end because it's right up at the northern end of Australia, and it's quite different from the rest of Australia in terms of cultural influences. In fact, it's nearer to Jakarta in Indonesia than it is to Sydney, so you get a very strong Asian influence there. That means we get lots of tourists. People from other parts of Australia are attracted by this sort of international cosmopolitan image. And as well as that, we've got the same laid-back atmosphere you get all over Australia, probably more so, if anything, because of the climate. But what a lot of the tourists don't realise until they get there is that the city's also got a very young population. The average age is just 29, and this makes the whole place very buzzy. Some people think that there might not be that much going on as far as art and music and dancing and so on are concerned because it's so remote. I mean, we don't really get things like theatre and opera in the same way as cities down in the south, like Sydney, for example, because of the transport expenses. But in fact, what happens is that we just do it ourselves. Lots of people play music, classical as well as pop, and there are things like artists groups and writers groups and dance classes. Everyone does something. We don't just sit and watch other people.
You said it's very international?
Yeah, they say there's over 70 different nationalities in Darwin. For instance, There's been a Chinese population there for over 100 years. We've even got a Chinese temple. It was built way back in 1887, but when a very bad storm, a cyclone in fact, hit Darwin in the 1970s, it was almost completely destroyed. The only parts of the temple that survived were part of the altars and the stone lions. But after the storm, they reconstructed it using modern materials. It's still used as a religious centre today, but it's open to tourists too, and it's definitely worth going to see it. Oh, and as far as getting around goes, you'll see places that advertise bicycles for hire, but I wouldn't recommend it. A lot of the year it's just so hot and humid. Some tourists think it'll be fine because there's not much in the way of hills and the traffic's quite light compared with some places, but believe me, you're better off with public transport. It's fine and not expensive. Or you can hire a car, but it's not really worth it.
What's the swimming like?
Well, there are some good beaches, but the trouble is that there's this nasty creature called the box jellyfish, and if it stings you, you're in bad trouble. So you have to be very careful most of the year, especially in the winter months. You can wear a lycra suit to cover your arms and legs, but I wouldn't like to risk it even so, personally. And there are the saltwater crocodiles too. I mean, I don't want to put you off. There are protected swimming areas netted off where you'll be safe from jellyfish and crocs, or there are the public swimming pools. They're fine, of course.
You now have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, which places would you specially recommend?
Well, one of the most popular attractions is called Aquascene. What happens is every day at high tide, hundreds of fish come in from the sea, all different sorts, including some really big deep sea fish. And some of them will even take food from your hand. It's right in the middle of town at the end of the esplanade. It's not free. I think you have to pay about $5, but it's definitely something you have to experience. Then, of course, Darwin has a great range of food. Being such a cosmopolitan place, and if you don't have lots to spend, the best place to go is to Smith Street Mall, where they have stalls selling stuff to eat. There's all sorts of different things, including Southeast Asian dishes, which I really like. You'd think there'd be plenty of fresh fish in Darwin, as it's on the coast, but in fact, because of the climate, it mostly gets frozen straight away. But you can get fresh fish in the restaurants on Cullen Bay Marina. It's a nice place to go for a special meal, and they have some good shops in that area too. What else? Well, there's the Botanic Garden. It's over 100 years old, and there's lots to see. An orchid farm, rainforest, a collection of palm trees, a wetlands area. You can easily spend an afternoon there. That's at Fanny Bay, a couple of kilometres out to the north. Then, if you've got any energy left in the evening, the place to go is Mitchell Street. That's where it all happens as far as clubs and music and things are concerned. You'll bump into lots of my friends there. Talking of friends, why don't I give you some email addresses? I'm sure they wouldn't mind if you...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You'll hear two university students discussing a social science lecture they attended. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24. Did you go to the first social science lecture yesterday?
Yeah. Didn't you see me there?
No. I was trying so hard to understand the lecturer.
What didn't you understand?
A lot of it, really. For example, he said we needed to study history as part of the course, but I didn't get why.
You probably missed it. He said early on that we need to learn from our past mistakes.
Right. But he also said we need to put ourselves in the place of our ancestors. Why is that?
I think the point is that it's not enough to know how they lived and what they did. We need to know what they thought.
I see. And I've written transferable skills in my notes next, but I have no idea what that means.
If you study social science, you learn skills that you can use in a job.
Oh, right. Is that all? Okay, but why is that?
The point he made was that in studying social science, you use a flexible and adaptable approach to learning.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
He also kept mentioning all the other subjects we will need to study as part of the course. I didn't write them all down, did you?
Some of them. I think I can make sense of my notes. The first one was anthropology, which he said would cover prehistory and archaeology as well.
Okay.
Then there's economics. I wrote down that this was not meant to mean that we will spend all our time looking at economic theory, but more that we need to see how humans behave.
That's good. I don't think I could handle economic theory. He said something about education too, didn't he?
Yeah. He said we'll be looking at how cultural information is handed down from one generation to the next through teaching children.
He said we'd be focusing on geography too, but I can't really remember which aspects. Can you?
I noted it down, I think. Here we are, yes, particularly in relation to urban planning. It's law that I got confused about. I didn't understand why he linked that to economics.
I think he meant that laws affect the way wealth is distributed.
That makes sense. Now, what are the science wars?
Okay, I did get that. The science wars are about how social science collects information. In sociology and social work, and in social science generally, they can only study patterns of behavior and observe. If you compare that to the way scientists work in physics or chemistry, it's very different because they use specific experiments that can be tested and which give concrete answers. Social studies is often accused of being unscientific. That's all.
Okay. But it still looks like a good course, doesn't it? You don't have any regrets, do you?
None at all. I'm looking forward to it.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on cities of the future. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 31 to 37.
Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 37.
Okay, we've been looking at how societies will develop in the future and at the increase in the size of cities. So I want to talk to you today about the key considerations in these cities of the future. There are 3 key elements I want to look at, and these are the new features they will have, issues of size, and the main problems to be considered. First of all, individual transportation will be a big factor in these new megacities as public transport becomes unmanageable. There'll be a huge rise in the use of segways, which are personal transporters like motorized scooters. As a result, and partly also to reduce pollution, roads will be altered so that they are narrower and will take up less of a city's space than they do currently. Naturally, this is a major change to the infrastructure, and something that may hinder it is the huge amount of investment it will require. The next thing is, what is going to happen to the commercial areas? We do not want these to become even larger concrete jungles than they are at present, so we have to look at design. And current designs for city development include building gardens on the roofs of these buildings to make a more pleasant environment for workers. And you may think that these areas will expand to cope with increased commercial activity. In fact, the prediction is that they will cover 1/5 of the area that they do at present as we build upwards. The exception to this is shopping centres, which we predict will expand with more and more temperature-controlled malls. What may cause difficulties is that the superstores will be confined to the outer edges of the city, as they will be too big to fit into the new malls. Then, of course, there are the residential areas, and these will undergo their own changes. One particular development will be houses which are built from glass, as innovations in this material allow it to provide light without causing problems with temperature inside a building. The residential areas will not be allowed to expand without limit, as happens in some areas at present, and their size will be restricted to a population of 15,000. One issue, which has yet to be resolved, and I'm not sure it ever will be, is how we manage to house older residents. They will be increasing in numbers as time goes on. Finally, how will these cities live? We know we have limited energy sources, so what will we do? Well, something currently in development, which will be a feature, is that waste is going to become an energy source. For example, to provide gas in homes. Also, as new technology and systems are developed, we will find that energy plants will become smaller. Another energy source we could use, but one which raises issues of having enough space and too much noise, is wind farms. Because of the problems, I'm not convinced these will be the grand solution to our energy problems that we thought they were going to be.
Now you have some time to look at questions 38 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 38 to 40.
Now, moving on to looking at the social aspect of cities, we need to look at housing and how people will live. Cities currently have flats in the centre, populated by single people and wealthier residents, and families tend to move to the outskirts. In the future, the centre of cities will see a dramatic change. We will see many more examples of cooperative buildings. This is where people join together to form a company that owns the building they live in. And despite continuing shortages, there will also be a rise in the provision of retirement homes in city centres so that the elderly can have easy access to hospitals and shops. Recently, we have seen a levelling off in the growth of private housing, and I think that will not change. But we are likely to see more social housing, as far fewer people will be able to afford to own their own homes. Okay, now, if anybody has any...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.